I will consciously choose to wing it with Derek. Come on up. Don't be bashful. I've never seen you bashful yet. Derek and I first got to know each other as neighbors. And when I say that he was a robust and healthy 50-some-year-old, or maybe, yeah, let's go with 50-something. He was the life of our neighborhood. He was a fountain of optimism and energy, and for me, a never-ending source of good humor. I took to him instantly, and then took it up a notch when he bonded with my father. Now, Derek's travels have taken him all over the world. And one reason my father and I both bonded with Derek was because he had spent a lot of time in Australia, where I have a sister that resides. So it's a country that's near and dear to our heart. But at that time, Derek was running a very successful business, the Simmons Mattress Gallery outlets, and making more money than he could spend in a year. I was suspicious of. That's the story. Anyway, Derek, a number of years ago, and he's probably going to tell you some more specific details.
Let me tell the story.
He came down with an illness that he's going to tell you about. And the reason that I've asked him to be here today, and the committee approved, is that for me, he's been a personal source of inspiration and a fountain of hope. And he doesn't have Parkinson's, he doesn't have a neurological disorder, but I think that you can see within the stories that he's going to share the common thread that we all share. And I don't think I should say any more, should I?
Nothing left for me.
But this is my friend Derek Caine, and he's going to spend a few minutes with us.
So it's been a long day. I guess your minds are full of information, your hearts are full of the people you've met and talked to, and building, hopefully, relationships to go forth. So the last thing you need is a long and boring talk from me, so I'm not going to talk for too long. I'll keep it as short as I can. And I'll just give you my point of view, and my secret for me keeping my mind in a reasonable condition. And I do have a neurological condition. It's called a chemo brain. It hits you like a hammer when you come to realize the challenge of your life is right there before your eyes. The facts of life so suddenly have a meaning, all anew, and you struggle to conceive. Why me? Why not you? December 2003, I walked into my townhouse and I sat down on the steps leading up to my bedroom, and I cried like a baby. I don't remember crying like that before. I obviously did, because I was a pretty cheeky young boy, but I don't remember. I just come from the hospital, and the surgeon told me, Derek, you have leukemia. Now, I was in there for 15 minutes, but as soon as he said that, my mind shut down, and all I could think of, leukemia. Shit, that's cancer. I'm going to die. And I was sitting there sobbing, thinking to myself at the same time, I don't smoke. I think when I was a teenager, I tried it for a couple of years and decided it wasn't for me. I'm a very light social drinker, almost to the point of really not drinking at all. I ate well, had a great business, had a loving family, and every morning before work, I'd go to the pool and I'd swim 1,500 meters every morning. I'd done that for 25 years. It was just unfathomable. I just could not come to grips with it at all. Now, I wish I could tell you that, a couple of months went by and I, got on the big wide, wonderful web and was reading about what I had and what the opportunities were, or what the prognosis was. But, you know, I was very busy at the time. I had, as we said, I owned the Simmons Mattress Galleries. And I had just bought land in Bayers Lake, and I was in the process of building my own showroom warehouse. So during the day, I was really busy. But, you know, as soon as I stopped, and, you know, when the days were 40-hour days back then, for sure. But when I stopped, it just was just pounding in my brain, and everybody was hurting. It was difficult, the family relationship, because I just wasn't happy. So I went to the doctor, and I said to my doctor, hey, give me some of those happy pills. I want to just pop one of those in my mouth, and I just want to be floating, and, you know, and that's going to be great. Now, I will tell you that my GP had already told me that 80% of the patients that came in to see him for consultations during the course of a day, he could cure with a sugar pill. He said, but I ain't allowed to do that. That could lead us to an hour's discussion on the state of our healthcare here in Canada and Nova Scotia and the way everything's structured. But we'll leave that for another time. So he said, no, I'm not going to do that, Derek. He said, but I want you to go and see a friend of mine. He's a psychologist, and I've had a lot of success with him. My patients I've sent to him, you know, they've responded well, and I'm sure he'll help you. So I said, well, why not? So I went down, saw the psychologist, and sat in his rooms. And I talked for an hour and a half, and it was an hour appointment, and he did charge me for the extra half an hour, by the way. And at the end of it, I got up to leave, and he had saying all the right things, and we're going to get the wife in here and the family, and this and that, and we're going to do this, and it was great. And then as I'm walking out the door, he said, oh, Derek, did you sign the forms downstairs? Now, I knew exactly what he was talking about. But I turned around and said, no, what forms? What were they? He said, oh, my conditions of service. He said, you know, it is a business, you do understand that? I said, yes. He said, and one of the things we do ask you is to give us a credit card. And if you don't give us 48 hours notice of cancellation of appointment, or if you want to change it, 48 hours to do that, then we'll unfortunately have to bill you for the hour. I said, oh, yeah, okay, thanks very much. So I went downstairs and I walked out the door, and it was kind of unusual for Halifax because the sun was shining and it was a beautiful day. And I looked up and I thought to myself, you know what? I reckon he needs me more than I need him. And you know what? It snapped me out of it. So I did two things. The first thing I did was, all my life, adult life that is, I wanted a Jag. So I went down and I leased a brand new Jag. And that was, what more could I do? That was the most important thing to me at that time. And I went home and told my wife what I'd done, and she just looked at me. I said, don't worry. And actually it was the best car I ever owned. It went back at the end of the lease. I couldn't afford to buy it out. And but it was just wonderful. And the second thing I did, 1 minute, I'll be right back. Still here. I always had one of these, and this is a harmonica, but it's one that usually the folky players and the blues players play. It's called a diatonic harmonica. It only has 10 reeds, which is a lot less than the big ones you see like this. But I would listen to music, and I was never really into music. My life had been full of work and building wealth and my family, and I never had time for music in any formal sense or informal sense. We'd go to shows, but it really wasn't part of who I was. And I'd hear these blues tunes, and I'd pick this thing up, and I had why does it sound so horrible? I had no idea. So I was determined that I was going to find out. So I was fortunate at the time. I had a few friends that were musicians, and talked to them about it. And they used to let me sit in and make a noise while they were doing their thing. And I'll tell you in a second where that led me. But before I get to that, what I want to do is just give. I think you've got the background. I mean, I read about me, and there was stuff in there I didn't even know about myself. But you know, I was born in England. I lived there till I was 14. While I was in England, I spent a lot of time in boarding schools. My mum passed when I was about 3 and a half. And I think I was about 8 or 9, Dad married again. So I didn't live a normal, stable childhood in terms of home life. So we came to Canada, went to Toronto, and I grew up there. I was 20 when I actually left. But I think the first thing that happened for me when I was in Toronto at the age of 15 was the realization of what you can do if you really want to do something. And I know in business I've always said to everybody, if you've got a business and you want to succeed, you need a hook. You need something to differentiate you from everybody else. So I was delivering newspapers for the Toronto Telegram. And they had a contest, and it was a cross-Canada contest. They had a weekend supplement magazine, and it was through the magazine it was organised. And the deal was just go out and sell new subscriptions, and in each area, the top two newspaper delivery boys will win a trip, 2-week tour of Great Britain and Scotland. And I thought, geez, I'd like to do that and go back. Now, I didn't have friends or relatives there that I could call on, and I had a newspaper route, and I thought, how am I going to do this? So I thought, I know what I'm going to do, and I got a picture of my grandmother. And I blew it up, this size, and hello, my name's Derek Caine, and I'm trying to win a trip to England to go and see my grandmother before she passes, and, it would be really good if you buy a subscription. I won. It wasn't untrue, by the way, but it was just the thinking which has been with me all my life. So I decided that there was more to life than, I don't know if I'm right or wrong in this, but for me anyway, than not a happy life in school, at home. So when I was 17, I got up in grade 11 and put my books in my locker. I went home and I packed a bag and I got out and I got on with the rest of my life. And I've been standing on my own 2 feet ever since. I was 20 when I decided I wanted to see the world. So I had enough money to get a ticket on a train from Toronto to Vancouver and get a ship from Vancouver through to ultimately Australia, but the first stop was Auckland, New Zealand, where I lived for 9 months. I went on to Australia and lived for 12 months. One interesting thing about Australia was that an opportunity that I had was during the Second World War, there was an Australian family that lived in New South Wales, and they would send food parcels to my grandmother. And I was determined to go and thank them, and I did. So I met the family, and it was an amazing experience. The only great difficulty was that they were, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this, but it's just what happened. They were an extremely religious family, and every night they would encourage me to read the New Testament. And I was trying to explain to them, I'm Jewish, and you've got an Old Testament somewhere, but it didn't seem to ring any bells. So I travelled there, and then I ended up, I did Europe, and I ended up a few years later living and working in Nassau in the Bahamas, where I met my beautiful wife, who's from your part of the world. She's from the Miramichi. And we got married, and we decided to leave, and I said, Canada's bloody cold, love, let's go back to Australia. So she said, okay, well, why not? So we went back there. We were there for 32 years. And 13 in Sydney, which was great, but the most wonderful part of it was the 20 years we spent in Western Australia. Beautiful climate, a fantastic place to bring up a family. So, and then we came home 16 years ago. I had a daughter living in Europe we're newly married with a husband in Germany. My son was testing the beers in Europe at the time. And so, that's what brought us back. We just decided it was time to come back and be with the extended family. And I won't go through the business side of things, but you obviously know we had the Simmons Mattress Gallery. Anybody ever see any of the ads for the Simmons Mattress Gallery? The crazy ads we used to do? No? Yes? Okay. Do you want to buy a mattress, by the way? So we came back and we started off, and that led me through to the challenges of dealing with my leukemia. I got some great advice from a musician. Has anybody here ever heard of Matt Anderson? Okay, so Matt's an amazing musician now. But, 8 years ago, he had a weekly gig in at Stainer's Wharf. Every Wednesday night, I would go down and sit next to him, and he would sing and do his thing, and I would make my noise. And one night he did his thing, and he nodded to me to do my solo, and I said, keep playing, Matt. And Matt, as he can only politely do, said, why? And I said, because I don't know where to go. He said, I'll tell you what to do. I thought, now this is why I am here. This is what it's all about. I said, what, Matt? He said, just blow the friggin' thing. And I tell that because that's what life's all about, eh? If you don't give it a go, if you're not prepared to try something, then you'll never know. And you could be missing out on for me, it would have been the most incredible experience of my life, and that was playing music. I know you've had somebody here today talking about music and how it helps the old brain box, and for me it's been the most amazing experience of my life. Because when I get up and sing and play, at whatever level it is, it doesn't matter. But when I get up and do that, I just go somewhere else, and I settle down, and it's an amazing experience. Okay, so I have three philosophies in my life. The first thing is, as I've said before, you've got to believe in yourself. Because if you don't believe in yourself, who the hell else is going to believe in you? You've got to believe in yourself, and you've got to be convinced that you can do the things within reason that you want to do. And in doing that, I tell my kids this, and particularly in business, and this is not business, but don't be afraid of making a mistake, because it shows that you're prepared to try something. Just don't be stupid and make the same mistake twice. Advocacy. Wow, that's what we're all about too, eh? Advocacy. The best advocate in the world for you is when you stand in front of that mirror and you look in the mirror, and there he or she is looking right back at you. Nobody, whatever they say to you, however they try and convince you, is going to be the advocate that you can be for yourself. My first experience with learning this was when I was initially diagnosed. And by the way, I've had 6 months of chemo on 2 occasions. And I was, after I was diagnosed, before I went to see the hematologist, there was a 3 months wait. The night before, and I was just so, this was going to be so important to me. The night before, the phone rings, and the nurse said, I'm sorry, your doctor's sick. You can't see him, and we'll call you back and let you know. And I said, wait a minute. What do you mean, call me back? She said, we've got to work it out. I said, is it going to be tomorrow, next week, the week after, 2 months? She said, well, I can't tell you that. I was just a mess. So next morning I got on the phone and I advocated for myself. And I didn't give up. And 2 days later I was in talking to a hematologist. It wasn't my hematologist, but it was a hematologist in the hospital. And I had to do that because I had so much building up inside me that it was so important to me. So fairly shortly after I started seeing my regular hematologist, he decided that I had to start treatment. And I had an oral treatment, an oral drug, and it was 6 months. 10 months after that, I relapsed. And I went to discuss it with the doctor, and I said, why didn't you even tell me that, that this was a short-term thing, possibly? And he just said, oh, well, I said, okay. And I've been talking to him also about, it was proven with my challenge, that you need to have some special diagnostic tests done. They're fairly complicated, and they actually grade the level of the infection. I have chronic lymphocytic leukemia. You can have chronic lymphocytic leukemia for 20 years and never need treatment and die of old age. You can have chronic lymphocytic leukemia and very quickly need treatment, and it's very aggressive. Ultimately, it's the treatments that will end your life. And I wanted to know, it was important to me, and I couldn't get any sense. So I picked up the phone, I rang the Mayo Clinic, I went down to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, and I had the test done. I was advocating for myself. I had a consultation down there, and you can sit and talk to him all day, okay? The clock's ticking, but it's not a 10 or 15 minute thing, whatever it may be here. When you pay for it, talk all day if you want to. But it was good, and I came back with a recommendation for treatment. Here's where it gets fun again. The recommendation I had was for a treatment that wasn't approved and wasn't available necessarily in Nova Scotia. I got that treatment. I got that treatment 9.5 years ago. My hematologist, my new hematologist, fought for it, and I managed to get it. It didn't cost me anything. If I hadn't have done that, I would probably still be here, but my life would have been completely different. My quality of life would have been terrible, because I'd have had more chemotherapy and then more and more. But I've been in remission now for 9 years, and to me that's absolutely fantastic. I can't believe it. It ain't a cure yet, but it's, you know, I was expecting about 6 years when I was first diagnosed. So here I am, and you know, you've got to fight for yourself. You've got to stand up for yourself. You've got to push the envelope. You have to do that, because it's you. It's your life. It ain't mine. It isn't the doctors. It isn't the advisors. It's you. And nobody cares more about you than you do yourself. And I guess one of the things I know that as I've gone through all this, all the years, everybody asks how you are, you know, what's going on. But how many caregivers are here today? Yeah. You know what? You go through as much mental anguish and challenges, and perhaps even more in some ways than we do. And I just want to thank you for being there for us. You're part of who we are. Now, I'm running out of time, but I wrote a song. Let me just go back one quick step. When I started playing the harmonica, a friend of mine said to me, "Hey, why don't you record a CD?" And I said, "Have you heard me playing?" And he said, "Unfortunately, yes." I said, "Who would buy the CDs?" He said, No. This is for you, Derek. You do it. I'll put a band together for you, and you do it." I thought about it, and I said, "Yeah, let's do it." And I doubly thought about it, and I thought, I'm going to use this to put money back, to help, to put back into the community. So I created a fund called the Little Derek Leukemia Fund, and we recorded a CD, and my band is Charlie Acord, Dave Skinner, Ross Billard, and Danny Sutherland, 4 great musicians. And we recorded the CD, and since we started, we've done 3 CDs. We've raised over $200,000. Now, the money is just for the patients. It's not for the hospital. It's not for research. It's just for the patients. And the only person that can touch that money, or persons, are the social workers on the hematology floor. Nobody else has any access to it. So it was such a big part of my life, and it gave me the opportunity to play music too, of course. So I wrote a song for each of the CDs, and I opened my talk with the first verse. There's 2 songs, and I just want to read you the last verse of that song. It started off, "It hits you like a hammer," and the last verse is, "It's not the final sentence. We now start to fight. Determination forces us to see the world with new delight. The people that we love have a meaning all anew. Our senses come alive as we fight the Parkinson blues." Now, the second song I wrote was called "You Don't Understand." And I wrote that song because people say things to us from their heart, and so often it has the opposite effect, the opposite meaning to what they mean. And the opening paragraph was, I can't even remember what it was now, hang on. Yeah. "The words that I listen to, your thoughts may be grand, coming straight from your heart, but you don't understand. How can I tell you what's deep down inside? How can I tell you what keeps me alive? The words that I hear, it's just a lot of natter, but it's no pills, drugs, or treatment. My mind fights over matter." And the final verse, to me, says it all. "The words that I listen to, your thoughts may be grand, and it makes me so happy that you don't understand." Hopefully you relate to that as I do. Now, what I'd like to do is finish on a happy, smiling note. I have a very good friend, Floyd King, who's a wonderful musician, and I'll ask Floyd if he'd come up to the stage, please. And we're going to sing a couple of songs. I'll sing one, he'll sing one, I'll make a noise on the harmonica, and we'll go home feeling happy. Okay.